Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this stream. Thank you, Roman and James, for being here. And thanks, everyone in chat, to watch here live as we talk about a new Pecl. Roman, James, welcome. Oh, Roman, I can hear myself. um, yeah, but that's all fine. Roman and James, before we start talking about Pecl, I wanted to ask you to quickly introduce yourselves for people who don't know you. James, maybe let's start with you. Who are you? What are you doing? And why are you here?
Hey, yeah, my name is James. As you rightly introduced me, well done. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. I have been a programmer for like a long time, like over 20 years, I think, at least in a professional circumstance. And before that, I was a kid coding in my bedroom and learning all the interesting things at the time, things like PHP 3 and how much better it was than Perl at the time, which was fascinating. But yeah, fast forwarding to these days, I work for a company called Rove. We're like a group of freelancers. We work on various projects for various companies. Do a lot of legacy work. Doing a talk at conferences at the moment about living life on a legacy project. I'll be at DPC next week as well,
Nice.
which will be fun. But yeah, joined the PHP Foundation at the start of the year. I've always been sort of a bit involved with Pecl. I've worked on an extension for a customer before, an APM extension, and getting to grips with Pecl was quite interesting for me. And when Roman mentioned the opportunity to work on a new revolutionized Pecl, I kind of grabbed at the chance for it. So yeah, here I am today doing a bit of work for the PHP Foundation on this, which I'm sure we'll dive into in a bit more detail shortly.
Nice. So you're a PHP programmer, but I learned also a Java programmer, a C programmer, I
Yes.
guess, if you're working on PHP internal stuff.
Yes.
Rust
Yeah.
programmer.
Yeah. I actually originally I cut my teeth on probably my first language was Amiga Basic, but my first sort of making actual programs was probably on C. I worked on the days of MUDs, multi-user dungeons, like text-based role-playing games. I did quite a lot of that in C.
Nice.
If anyone remembers, I used to use a code base called Circle Mud quite a lot. That's going back a bit, but maybe not everyone has heard of that. It's been a while. But yeah, I learned various languages. I actually learned Perl to write a website for one of the MUDs, and then that's when I discovered PHP, and everyone's like, "Hey, PHP 3 can do what Perl does, but better and easier, and you can talk to a database easier and things like that." And then I heavily got into PHP, JavaScript, and over time, I've picked up Java and most recently Rust, which is an interesting language for sure. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite impressive there, what you have on your resume. Very nice. Roman, let's quickly introduce yourself. Most people here on the channel might already know you, but for people who are new, just a quick introduction. Who are you and why are you here, Roman?
Currently, I manage PHP Foundation, so I do a lot of admin stuff there. And naturally, it involves technical questions, planning, and talking to developers a lot. Yeah, that's what I do full time. And I work at JetBrains in PHP Storm team. So part of my work is related to PHP Storm as well.
Nice. Well, thanks for being here both. We're going to talk about Pecl. Apparently, someone in chat also knows Amiga Basic. I've never heard of it, James, but you're not alone here. Apparently, a bit more older people are here as well. Can I say it like this? It's super nice people in chat. If you have any questions for Roman or James or me, but that would be very interesting in this for this topic. Share them in chat, and we'll be happy to talk about them as well. We have a couple of questions already written down, but first of all, we want to have a little chat here about what's going on, because there's a new Pecl coming. James, what is Pecl actually for people who aren't aware of what and never heard of it maybe?
Yeah, Pecl is a tool that is based on something called pair. So knowing that they all work together and are all sort of intertwined is the first thing to understand. So pair, let's explain that first. Is is a tool that was written to go with PHP that essentially does the same job as Composer does. Right? It's designed to download PHP packages into your project and manage dependencies. It had quite a lot of use back in its day. Obviously, it's of late it's probably fallen out of fashion as such, but I imagine there's a lot of projects still using pair somewhere around. But given the advent of Composer and how easy that made things, it's kind of fallen by the wayside and isn't maintained as much anymore. So Pecl is, which stands for PHP Extension Community Library, is based on pair. And I believe it uses the same code base and everything, so it's kind of more or less the same tool. And that is the same, but it's for PHP extensions, right? Technically, PHP modules and Zend extensions is the correct terminology. But everyone calls them PHP extensions, which is fine. But the idea of Pecl is you say, hey, I would like to install an extension like Xdebug, for example. That's probably one many of us use, and you would just type Pecl install Xdebug, and it should, in theory, download your extension, compile it for you for your system, and install it with the right permissions and so on. So that's what Pecl is. It's still in use. And there is a website, pecl.php.net, where you can find all the existing Pecl extensions, and there is quite a few of them, and they're still in use, of course. So
we show them here. That's the Pecl website. Beautiful design, but apart from that, lots of extensions, right? And it's just, I mean, to me as a PHP user, it feels pretty good. I just write Pecl install an extension name, and it usually works. Like sometimes I have to fiddle around with some header file somewhere, but for most cases, it seems to work. But apparently, you're deciding to rewrite Pecl, or the foundation is doing some work here. Roman, maybe you want to share a little bit of like what's going on there. Why the decision to rewrite Pecl?
Yeah, so we actually had this idea of doing something with Pecl for quite some time already. So we knew that there is an issue with the Pecl. So first, the website is not modern, and there are two problems or set of problems with Pecl. First is user problems, as in how to install extensions, but also maintainers problem. So currently the whole system is not very maintainer friendly, so they cannot easily release a new extension version, and they have to upload, and they cannot even register on this Pecl website. So this leads to extensions being a little bit off the PHP ecosystem, while, for example, many things that can be done with PHP are done with extensions. You obviously know Swool, and there are many other very cool extensions that are not shipped with PHP, but it's if there was an easy way to install them and basically having them as first class citizen in PHP world, that would probably be very different world for PHP. So this was something on our mind for quite a while, and we in the foundation we tried to find resources or trying to find people who would be able to do something with this. And initially, I reached out to a few folks in the community and asked them, "Hey, would you be interested to do something with this? Maybe fix with the website, maybe modernize the Pecl tool." And well, I kind of proposed them to do some volunteer work, and people don't have much free time.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like these few folks that I proposed this, they took a look and they were like, "Oh my god, this is quite a bit of work to do and research." And what happened later is that we reached out to STF, Sovereign Tech Fund. It's a German government-backed fund.
Okay.
So they invest in open source projects. By invest, what they mean that they don't give you money just for anything. You have to provide them specific projects or specific ideas that you want to accomplish, and then if they like those projects, then they can give you money for those projects. And the first idea that we had is Pecl. So basically, we had 4 ideas in total, 4 projects, and the other 3 were just talk to accompany Pecl initially, but they also turned out to be good projects. It's a security audit, it's documentation work, it's a FPM testing tool. But the very first one was Pecl, and the idea behind it was it's just we need to modernize this infrastructure thing for PHP ecosystem. We need to make it secure. We need to make it modern and easy for both users and maintainers. So yeah, this is how it appears. And thankfully, this STF fund, they agreed. They liked these ideas, so we got money, and then we hired. Actually, James was on our a pool of developers that willing to work with Foundation from the very beginning of the Foundation creation. So yeah, it's just a perfect match. So we started. One of our other developers was and is Derek, the author of Xdebug extension, and I think he's one of the most interested people in this Pecl overhaul project. So he initially started the design, and but then when James joined, James also told us that he's willing to do this, and it moves really nice, I think. So let's maybe dive deeper in what's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'm really curious to hear, like, there are a couple of like problems for developers, for users as well. There's the thing of security that's pretty important if you're dealing with like extension in management for PHP. So, but what will this new Pecl, what will it look like? What are the differences here, James? Maybe you want to share some thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as Roman pointed out, like, I think that the biggest drawback that we have at the moment is the infrastructure behind this, and the tool itself. It's, as I mentioned, it's based on Pair, which is it has very little attention for maintenance. We have this pecl.php.net site, which is not many people know how to maintain it, how to add users to it, and so on. So I think one of the biggest changes is going to be sort of the back end of this. It's the front end experience. Like for us as developers on a project, we want to install an extension. Not a lot really is going to change. We're going to use a different tool, and it's everything behind the scenes that we want to improve. So what that will probably look like is it's we're going for a similar style to how Composer is, and in fact the tool itself is going to be using a lot of how Composer works. Okay. The reason why is because we're going to be putting PHP extensions into Packagist, the same repository where all the the current PHP source code packages are, which it alleviates the issue of maintaining that library of packages or extensions rather that should be available. There's an existing tool that does that very well. It's a
Yeah.
tool that many of us are familiar with. So it absolutely makes sense. The great thing about that is, as I'm working on this project, I'm pulling in a lot of code that Composer has already written to, resolve dependencies, pull packages from Packagist,
Right.
and so on. It makes life a lot easier for us because all of that infrastructure already exists. So
Yeah.
let's tap into it and use it. So essentially what you'll be doing is using a new command line tool and doing whatever the new command line tool is going to be called, install xdebug. So not a lot will change for the end users.
Okay, that's interesting. So the old Pecl website, do I understand correctly that that's going away and is basically getting replaced with Packagist as well?
That's a long-term goal, yes.
Okay.
If we're reducing, we want to use Packagist and lean on that. It's existing infrastructure, and not having to maintain pecl.php.net would be a good bonus, I think. So maybe
Yeah.
not, it's not going away anytime soon. That's for sure. But certainly, it'll be there for a while.
Definitely, it's a long-term project, but it's getting worked on, and there's in like vision, and there's funding as well to actually move this forward. So about the Packagist stuff, then does this mean that for extension authors, basically, will they get a Composer JSON file where they configure everything as well, like the same thing that feels familiar to PHP developers? What does that look like?
Yes, that's exactly right. At the moment, an extension maintainer will maintain this file called package.xml, which is what
Okay.
Pecl uses to gather metadata about various releases that are available. We're going to be switching over to using a composer JSON in the same way as you do for any library. If you're a library maintainer, you can make a composer JSON. The key difference is that there's not such an emphasis on dependencies here. Your library or your extension rather, it probably isn't going to have many other dependencies.
Yeah.
It will probably depend on system libraries. That's out of scope at the moment. There's a whole complex reason why. But you'll make a composer JSON. You'll say what PHP version your package supports, and maybe some options if you need it. There you go. We're
Yeah.
seeing what that might look like indeed. And then you submit your PHP extension to Packagist. So that's the plan. We're working with the composer, the composers. I think they call themselves. I don't know.
Yeah.
To make that happen, because at the moment it's not possible, but it will be soon, hopefully.
Just a small side note here, totally off topic, but did you know that like the logo for Composer is actually a conductor and not a composer? Anyway, that's just so yeah, interesting. Although some conductors are composers, so I guess that it makes sense in a way. But so this is the Composer JSON. Will it be called Composer JSON as well for extensions?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's again, we're using the same infrastructure, the same code that Composer uses to process these. We're just going to be tapping into that.
Does all of this have to go through the RFC internals process, or is this just we're gonna build it and people who want to use it can use it?
So it's being built at the moment. Independent of the RFC process, there will come a point, I suppose, where we will have to raise an RFC and be like, do we want to adopt this as an official PHP group mechanism? Perhaps that's a bit off in the future. I haven't thought too much of that, but I suppose that will be something that we'll go through discussions and so on.
Gotcha.
I can add. So currently, when you install PHP, what you get is actually a few tools with it. It's PHP itself. It's Pecl. It's PHP. Now we'll talk about it a little bit later about it. And PHP DBG. It's the debugger for PHP. And I think we will need an RFC to ship this new tool instead of Pecl at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question here from Marco. I didn't fully understand if this ties into Composer install or whether it is a separate tool to run that uses Composer to resolve dependencies too. James, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Yes, it is indeed a separate tool. We what I say by what I mean by saying it uses Composer is like we use the code that runs Composer as well. So there'll be a separate tool that pulls in dependencies and so on. Your extension and so on, and installs that. So separate tool to Composer. A Composer install won't be installing extensions as such. So it's completely separate process.
Right. Can I from a project's perspective, like a PHP's Composer JSON file, you can already specify extensions. Will there be some way to like automatically check your Composer JSON file and install extensions when needed? Is that something that's planned here as well?
It's definitely something we've discussed because
Okay.
it seems like a natural progression, but is something we need to think about carefully. I think because there's the big difference with a Composer JSON as it stands for a project at the moment is you are installing your project specific dependencies. PHP extensions are not project specific at the moment; they're global on your system. So managing those is kind of it's a different different set of processes, if you like. So making sure that we respect that, extensions are global. It means that, if you look at a project, you can see, Composer tells you at the moment if you've got that extension installed or not. There is potential scope for suggesting, would you like to use Pi to the new Pecl tool to install this extension? But certainly at the moment, we've kind of agreed that it doesn't make sense to bake that into Composer at this stage. Not to say it wouldn't happen in the future. We just need to make sure it happens in the right way so that we're not breaking everything, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely. I think like Thomas, who's going to space apparently, also asked about is like how would this work on shared servers? And from what you're saying here, I think nothing much will change. Like it's still installing extensions globally, so on shared servers, I would assume like the system administrator would have to manage all of that.
Yes, unfortunately, at this stage, nothing changes there really. This is it's just a new tool that's going to be replacing Pecl, but there's certainly scope for looking into things to project specific extensions and being able to install things on shared hosts. I know a lot of shared hosts do have ways of plugging in extensions and so on as you require them. So
Right. Okay. Interesting. Bernard is asking here, can we dream of a world where extensions could be project specific, not global? I assume you might have already touched that topic during those discussions you had. You want to share any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it absolutely is something that we've discussed, and I've discussed this with Gina as well, also on the PHP Foundation, and there's things to overcome, like how extensions get loaded and so on is a part of the PHP's life cycle. So when you start up an extension, there's two stages to starting an extension. There's starting the module, which happens like once when you start for example, if you're using PHP FEM, it would start the PHP FPM and it would do what's called a module in it. And then separately for each request, you have a request in it and then a request shutdown once that finishes. And then once you've killed the PHP process, like PHP FPM, for example, that would call the module shutdown. So what that allows extension maintainers to do is basically provide persistence between requests and not have to load everything every time we have a request, which is kind of it goes against how PHP works, or you think PHP works, where it's a shared nothing architecture, whereas extensions can overcome that barrier and share things between requests. So moving extensions to project specific architecture, it's possible, but there are things to overcome, like how do we keep that persistence, or do we want to keep that persistence, or do we want to there's a lot of questions about that. It's theoretically possible, of course, but just whether it's practical is another question.
Gotcha.
And it's something we've discussed. Would love to do, but I think is, at least for the initial scope, is not included.
Definitely. But we can dream of a world where we just write composer install in a project and just everything gets installed. Extensions.
Would be cool.
Right. Oh, nice.
I'd like to add something on that if
Go
I can.
ahead.
So I think there is a broader question here, is whether we can install PHP per project. So if we can reliably handle this part, then installing extensions is really easy, because we can install extensions per PHP installation.
Right.
So this is the thing we actually talking about. So maybe that could be our next project, installing PHP. And it's actually possible, because we have tools to build PHP statically, and so it's actually possible.
Right.
So yeah, it's not. I mean, it's a dream, but it's a realistic dream.
Right.
I hope.
And I think with the foundation being here now, people are allowed to dream a little bit more because, there are more than just a handful of developers working on stuff, and it's more than just volunteers. There's actually some funding here, so we can dream. We won't go into generics. I've seen people talk about them in chat as well, but we can dream. We can dream. One more question here from chat. With this new approach, will extensions still be made only with C++, or would it add support for PHP bundles as extensions as well?
That's a good question. At least as far as we've discussed so far, it's only for like the C extensions.
Okay. Yeah, that reminds me, by the way, like you're writing the new Pecl. Is this in PHP or in C or some other language?
It's written in PHP. There is a repository which is open. Anyone can feel free to have a look and see how things are going. It's very early days yet. There's not a lot there, so there's not really a lot to look at. But it's all like, it's, as you might imagine, it's open source development. It's open for anyone to look at on the PHP GitHub.
Okay. Maybe Roman, can you share a link to that in the chat? Is that possible? Because I don't have it at hand. I was wondering, I've seen some people talk about it in chat as well. Like I've seen Pi mentioned a couple of times, Pi or Pickle. I guess this is a joke, but definitely Pickles. The name of the tool, it will be Pecl, will it be something else? What's your input there?
Roman, do you want to take this?
So actually, James conducted a research on
Okay.
a language, or not a research, maybe like a survey. So there were a few ideas from James and from other foundation people, and then there were more ideas from the community on Mastodon, phpc.social, Mastodon, and Twitter, and Pi was something that we all liked immediately. I think we have a consensus on this name. So so far this is I'm sorry. So far this is an official name, but we'll see. We can
Pi.
change it, of course, before it goes into PHP. But for this time, at least at this moment, it's an official version, and I really like it. I mean, it's.
So does it mean something like PHP installer for extensions or something like that? Am I right? I didn't know that.
Spot on.
Okay. Okay, that means it's probably a good name. If it's like it feels intuitive, right? Pi. PHP Pi. Isn't there also
and it
a
even
project?
has a matching emoji, so
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I showed it in chat here. Pi. Nice.
And you don't even need like a short name, like it's already short enough.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't need to type anything, just PHP Pi. And
Nice. Isn't there a library that does something entirely different that's called PHP Pi or something like that?
HTTPI.
Oh yeah.
Or I think you just call it HTTPI, something like that.
That's different enough, I would say. And apparently it's already used by some e-commerce business, but yeah, chances are that someone else will be using the name somewhere. I guess Pi makes a lot of sense. So, but as far as I understand, it's not 100% the official name yet, but it probably maybe will be, unless there is a better alternative. Okay, let me check here. I saw. Go
There
ahead,
were
Roman.
a couple of really nice questions in the chat.
Yeah, I was just scrolling. Like I saw this one. What alternate build systems still work with this new installer? Thinking of Rust for extensions. I don't know if I understand Marco's question, but James probably does. I hope so.
Yeah, I understand. Like, it's within the realms of possibility to write PHP extensions using Rust. I know that there is. I don't know how, like, whether they're used in production or whether it's just a sort of experimentation, but it certainly is possible. And I think what Marco is asking is it possible to write an extension with Rust and you install that with this new tool Pi? Yes, in theory. I think initially we're just focusing on the C extensions, but the way we're writing it, it would certainly be possible to use Rust as a compiler instead, in the future. So there's definitely future scope for it.
Cool.
Can I expand this question a little bit?
Definitely.
So I think in the current design and in Pecl, what it does for and there is another question, but will this work on any OS?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. It will work on Windows, Linux, Mac OS, whatever. And currently, what it does on Windows or by design, it downloads the precompiled TLLs, basically precompiled extensions. But on the other operation systems, it will download sources and compile them. So I'm wondering if it's possible to do the same for other systems, like have a precompiled binaries and download depending on your architecture and your operation system. Then it will be language agnostic. Then it would theoretically be possible to be built in any language, Rust, you name it, and download it.
Gotcha.
What do you think, James?
Yeah, again, it's in theory, in anything is possible, right? As Alkeus rightly pointed out in chat as well, I've just seen, if you do a PHPI's configure and make install, in theory that should work with any language, because those are the three main commands we're going to be using. Obviously, we mentioned there's some additional configuration options with this. So yeah, in theory, it's possible to use any language for sure. But it's just whether you can plug into the PHP API internally. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah. So Derek comments that Linux distributions already do this, but that doesn't mean that we can do it by making it easier for users. So as far as I know, for example, Rust tool, Rust Up, when it installs Rust, it checks the packages for your distribution if you're on a certain distribution. I might be wrong, but in theory that could be an option, right? To check which distribution are on, which package manager you have, and reuse the packages. But I'm just speculating. I'm not.
I guess this question is also basically asking the same, right? What we just talked about. Cool. One more question here that I saw. What about making new extensions by community? Will it work like packages, like anybody can publish anything and it will be up to people if they will use it? Or will there be an improvement process? I don't know how it works with Pecl these days.
Yeah, how it works with Pecl at the moment, you have to have an account made on pecl.php.net, and if your extension is approved, like it has to conform to certain licensing, if I remember correctly, then you're able to submit your package, and your package has to have a package.xml. You use Pecl build, I think, I can't remember the name of the tool. It builds a zip file which you upload to pecl.php.net, and that has the source code and the metadata for your package at the moment. So the way that will be changing, because we're going to be using Packagist, yes, anyone can or anyone will be able to put an extension on Packagist. There's a certain package type, if I remember correctly, from the composer JSON that you put in.
Yeah.
It will make that available, and there's slightly different naming conventions as well for an extension. Normally you'd do like vendor / package name. In this case, it's just going to be ext hyphen whatever.
Yeah.
We don't anticipate any growth in the number of extensions, because largely, a lot of people think, oh, let's write an extension to do this, but actually it works fine just writing it in PHP. So there's some use cases where you absolutely do need an extension. Like if you want to link into a library, that's provided with general functions, then you have a couple of options now. Actually, you can use FFI, that now exists, that didn't a few years ago, or you can write an extension that wraps up that library. So yes, to answer that question, yes, in theory, anyone can throw up an extension and publish it, and there wouldn't be an approval process.
Okay, cool. Who's actually gonna port all the existing extensions to Packagist? Do extension authors need to do that themselves? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we expect. It should be a case of adding a composer JSON to your project and publishing it to Packagist. So there is a minimal amount of work to do, but a little bit, and obviously we'll provide guidance and so on for extension maintainers to do that.
Cool. One more question here. People are talking about DLLs and SO files in chat, but maybe I want to highlight this one. What happens if no suitable DLL is available? Or does this project also improve the availability of DLLs? I actually don't know how it works on Windows these days. Does that happen sometimes, that your specific platform isn't supported?
So for a while, the Windows build server has not been working. I don't know if it's working now, but essentially what would happen is when you publish your extension to the pecl.php.net site, it would go off and build that for Windows. It would build the DLLs and make them available on pecl.php.net, so that when you on Windows, if you write pecl install whatever the extension is, it will go and look for the Windows pre-built DLL and download that. I think for a while that process has been broken, unfortunately, which means new version. There we go. Yeah, Derek's confirmed it's still not working, unfortunately. So that means at the moment, new versions of Pecl packages that are published, there is no Windows version at the moment.
Okay.
So that is definitely something we are going to tackle. We are going to put in a new process for using GitHub Actions, things like that, to attach DLLs to your GitHub releases. And the new PyTool will check for the availability of that DLL in your release and download it from there. So it will be a similar process, but it will be using things like GitHub Actions to automate that process on the extension maintainers repository, rather than having a Windows build server, which is as Derek confirmed is not working. So
yeah. Okay. The questions keep coming in. I have a couple of more questions I wanted to ask as well, but let's do one more, because this is interesting as well. Will it will handle enabling the packages by default? Actually, before you answer this, I installed PHP 8.3 a couple of weeks ago when I came back from holiday, and of course I also installed some of the extensions. I use Redis, Xdebug, and I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, but this is like. You write Pecl install, and then it does enable the package by default, but it uses the wrong path. Then I have to manually link to the right SO file. I don't know. Let's not go debug here in debug mode here, but this kind of like this question resonates with me. Sometimes when I write Pecl install, it doesn't work, and I have to do some manual work here. Will Py or whatever it's called be better here?
I think initially it will be using the same process, but I think certainly there's scope to to make sure that we are clear about sort of where things are being installed, and communicate that better. Like certainly on a platform that has multiple versions of PHP.
Yeah.
I run multiple versions of PHP on my machine, and so I need to be aware, like when I run Pecl install, well, which version of PHP is that using? And certainly things like the Andrej series, I probably butchered his name, sorry, the PHP installer on Ubuntu, you can configure Pecl to be a different version from when you run PHP. So that's very confusing. It's I think being able to communicate that better is certainly something that we should be doing.
Cool. Yeah, that's nice.
I
James,
wanted to
go ahead, Roman.
yeah. So one thing that comes up many times today is like, so initially we want to do this, and later we can improve. So I want to know that one of the goals of the foundation when we were establishing the foundation was to fix the bus factor issue, basically make the maintenance easy. So, and this is one of the goals of this project as well. So currently it's really, really not easy to contribute to Pecl and change something. And in fact, that is proved by the fact that no one has contributed to Pecl au pair for years. Yeah. So with this new tool, we expect that the community will start using it and start helping it with feedback on GitHub and pull requests, and it will be easier to iterate and improve it with time. So basically, fix the bus factor.
That's really nice. That's really good. That's much more important than adding fancy new features here that no one can use 10 years from now. So that's really nice. James, I'm wondering, you mentioned like what you do for Rove often is going into legacy projects. I imagine Pecl is also some kind of legacy project here. I assume you enjoy doing that, but I can imagine there are some challenges there as well. And I wanted to ask you, like, how is that process for you now that you're working on Pi? And super important as well, how can the community help here? Because let's not make you the bus factor for Pi. We need to embrace this as the community. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's it's kind of largely fallen on my head to work on this and drive it forward, which is absolutely fine. But I'm, one of the things I'm making sure to do is, all of the design documentation that I've been I've worked on so far, it's all public. It's on the PHP Foundation GitHub. I think it's like github.com/php the phpf/pi-design. So the design is all public. If anyone kind of wants to read through it, I know it's not necessarily the most exciting read, but it's important to get an idea of what this thing will look like, and certainly with specific people's use cases, like getting feedback and saying, hey, we use Pecl in this way, is this still going to be possible? That's a perfectly valid question, and our goal is always going to be, yes, that's still going to be possible. Or maybe not initially. This tool, the actual development has now started. It's very early days, but if once we've got a bit more of an established code base, contributions and so on are absolutely going to be welcome. Right. I know Anna Felina asked me the other day on Twitter, saying, "Oh, can I help with documentation?" And absolutely, things like that are going to be super important. Right. And making sure that everyone knows how this is going to work is going to be great. So for the development itself, it's very early days. There's probably not much scope for making pull requests because there's literally just a README at the moment. But development is starting, and very soon people will be able to see the code, have a play with it, and it's. I will most likely be communicating out on social media and whatever platforms I have access to say, hey, this is at a point where people can start playing with it and try it out and see how it works. But it's little early days yet. But sneak previews. If you want to see the ongoing code development, it's all there. It's all open. It's on GitHub. So
Nice, very nice. Roman, to link to that, how do people like keep in touch with what's going on here? Are there any official channels for the PHP Foundation that they can follow?
Of course. So we have Twitter, we have Mastodon, there we post updates. One thing that, and our blog at the php.foundation, the website. One thing that we kind of try to experiment with is having a new platform for discussions and ideas, and it's GitHub discussions. So we open GitHub discussions on our if you share my screen, I can show it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So our if we go to the PHPF, we have this discussions tab here, and I posted announcement that we want to open discussions and try it out. It's more like an experiment at this point. We'll see how it goes. So far, there is not much interest. So if it continues like that, we'll shut it down and we'll try something different. But it's we really want to be open and as much transparent as possible, and we actually need feedback a lot, because a lot of like when we make our decisions, we can analyze open source projects, we can ask open source developers and contributors, but PHP is much more. PHP is used on dozens of thousands, millions systems, and most of those are private projects, and we don't know what people are actually doing.
Yeah.
So the feedback there helps a lot from there. So for example, this guy, he asks for XHP, which I'm not even sure if it's a thing in the community and if someone uses it widely. So I asked if the extension that already exists helps him. So, and that's again a case for Pi, a new Pecl thing. So if the extensions are sort of like first-class citizens that everyone could write, maybe not write because it's not that easy, but install and use it, then they will be more maintained, more developed, and so we might not need to put everything into PHP core and just keep it in the extensions, because with having them in the extensions and not in the core has some pros. For example, they can have their own release cycle. They can add new features more frequently. They can release more often, fix bugs and stuff like that. So it makes a lot of sense to have them as separate tools, as separate extensions, as long as it's very easy to install them. So
I actually remembered, this is 10 years ago. For James, that's pretty young, probably. But this is when I started writing PHP professionally. And the first company I worked at, they kind of had this fear of relying on extensions because it's something extra and you have to manage that as well. Like these days, it's not really a big deal, even with Pecl from the user's perspective. For example, I work on a couple of Laravel projects. They need the Redis extension, for example. It's just people know they need it and they just run Pecl install. And if you use Laravel Forge or something like that, it sets it up automatically. It's good to see that, at least in my experience, compared to 10 years ago, it's already... Oh, and Marco is saying that it's still quite a big deal in many shops. Oh, for me, it's getting less of a big deal, and I hope that this can actually this can improve even more with this new tool and with the potential for future features that might make it even more easy to install stuff on a project level. It would be super nice, but. Yeah, I'm hopeful, and I called this video like a new Pecl reference to Star Wars: A New Hope. I really think that like that's the case here. It's super nice to see that there will be a new tool that's more developer friendly. That's super important. There will be integration with packages. Super nice. There's room for improvement. The buzz factor is decreasing here, and super cool. So yeah, I think, well, there are questions pouring in now. We still have some time. We can check here. Let's see what Marcel is saying. As a maintainer of Laravel Herd, I would love to find a way of installing statically compiled extensions so you don't have to manually compile it. Yeah, this is kind of circles back to what we talked about earlier in the stream as well, right? Might be a nice feature for the future, but right now, like the new tool won't change anything in this regard right now, but future perspective, right?
Yeah,
You go ahead.
I'd second that. It's what we're going for initially is more or less feature parity with the important stuff
Right.
that Pecl has, but because this is going to be using modern coding standards, it's going to be written all publicly. Folks can contribute to this, with no issues. There's a lot of scope for future improvements, and thinking like, how do we do this? Can we do this better? And stuff like this, like pre-compiling extensions. I know a lot of people have said, oh, it's a lot of hassle, but there is scope for ways of doing that. We could maybe provide a GitHub action that will just go and compile .so files for every single Linux, Unix, OS X that exists, alongside the Windows binaries. So there's scope for that, and this being open source, right? And hopefully it's going to be more approachable, not so much dark magic going on from the days of Pear and Pecl. Perhaps it's going to be more approachable so that folks can start to contribute these kind of features, if we're not already thinking of working on them ourselves as well.
Actually, like for me, this is the biggest takeaway from this talk. Like how the foundation is aiming to like reduce that buzz factor, and not necessarily like provide new features from the start, but improve the ecosystem and make it as a platform where people can actually build on, and that's really nice. So yeah, just a big applause for that from my side, and it really it makes me hopeful for PHP. I think it offers lots of possibilities for the future. With all of that being said, Rob and James, were there any like last thoughts you wanted to share before we wrap up this stream, or are you okay?
I think I'd like to raise an elephant in the room.
Okay.
Pardon the pun. But I think earlier in the chat someone mentioned about the Pecl project, and it's definitely worth raising, because Pecl is a previous attempt to modernize Pecl, right? And this is not something that has been completely ignored by the PHP Foundation. We've done a lot of research into Pecl, how it works, and in fact there is very likely going to be parts of Pecl that we're going to sort of transpose into Pi as well. So that effort is not completely wasted, and fallen by the wayside. It's very valuable to us, and I just want to thank the Pecl maintainers for their work on that.
Okay, that's good that you're pointing that out. Wow,
Yeah,
Roman.
and additionally, thanks for the having a permissive license for Pecl so that we can build upon it. It's appreciate it a lot. Thanks for Pecl maintainers.
Ah, nice. Yeah. Okay. Apart from that, anything else?
Yeah, I really like all the feedback and questions that we have in chat.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, folks. Feel free to share these concerns or expectations or your thoughts on discussions, GitHub discussions, or whatever platform you like. Just basically send it to us. We're really appreciate the feedback and questions.
Nice. Derek is asking why we're not writing it in Rust. Anyway, we're going to conclude the stream here. I want to thank all of you who were watching. I want to ask you, if you found this interesting, leave a like, maybe subscribe, and share this video, because I think it's an important topic that the wider PHP community needs to know about. Thank you, Roman and James, for being here and talking us through all these things. Super excited about it. I think I also want to thank Derek, who did a lot of work on this as well. Who's not, well, he's in chat here. So thank you, Derek, as well for doing so much of the preparation here. Thanks to the PHP Foundation. If you want to check them out and consider supporting them financially, or if your company wants to do that, go to the link I posted in chat, but I'll post it once more. And well, I hope to see you in the next one. So with all of that being said, have a nice day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.